So in the last video, I traced and transferred my design onto my watercolor surface. And as I mentioned, we want to plan out a background. So I'd shown you an example before that was done in acrylic, and this is one that we did in building with our classes. And we first put our background on and then paint over it. In watercolor, we really can't do that because it is a translucent, transparent medium. We have to place colors beside each other instead of on top of each other. Now you can layer colors in watercolor, of course. There are such things as glazing techniques. And with watercolor being translucent, transparent, it's easy to layer things over top of each other. But the thing is, those layers underneath will show through most of the time. So when it comes to our watercolor painting for this project, we want to have everything planned out so that when we start painting, we know where we need to stop an area and start an area. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to go with a similar texture as I had on my acrylic, and that is going to be a brick wall. So I'm going to use a ruler and of course a pencil. So my watercolor surface is 12 by 16. So I know I'm going to need some space in between the areas of my brick wall. So I'm going to plan out how many rows of bricks. Now, does this have to be perfectly even? No. As you saw in the acrylic example, the row of bricks at the bottom was a full row of bricks, whereas at the top it was a partial row of bricks. And bricks going off to the side did not completely finish. There are small pieces here and there. So when I do this, I'm going to just first determine how big I may want to start from this edge. So I'm going to come 2.5 inches down, and I'm going to put a mortar line of a 1/2 inch between these. So coming down here, I'm just kind of basically guesstimating what size I want my bricks to look like. So I'm not evenly distributing it, because if this were an actual photograph of graffiti on a wall, most graffiti artists don't plan out that the graffiti is perfectly centered to the number of rows of bricks if they're working on a brick wall, or the number of sections in a railroad car if they are car if they are painting on the side of that surface. So this is just purely for me to at least make sure they're uniform and slightly straight. So I started out at 2.5. I'm now going 3, my 1/2 inch space, and then another 3, and then my 1/2 inch space, and that will work out. So I'm going to mark once here at the bottom, and I'm going to move my ruler to the top and make the same set of marks, because again, I do want this to at least be even across my vertical surface. So once I have that, I'm going to lightly, and lightly is the key word here, I'm going to lightly draw my vertical lines in, and I'm going to stop and start around my graffiti. And then I'm going to work with my 1/2 inch mortar line. And again, I'm going to come over and stop at my graffiti and start back up. And I'm going to do that all the way across here. So there I have some rows of bricks, and now I need to divide them up vertically. So again, it's really up to me how I space this out. I'm going to keep to the 1/2 inch mortar line. So maybe I'm going to have just a piece here at the 1/2, and then my mortar line, and maybe this brick is going to be about 5 inches wide, my mortar line. And then I'm going to make the same marks at the top here. So I'm just doing this per row of bricks now. I'm not doing this across the whole paper, because remember, bricks stagger each other. So I don't want them to be perfectly even top to bottom here. So once I have that, I'm going to now connect my marks and get some individual bricks here for this row. Now you'll notice that I did mark inside of my graffiti area, and that's just because I wanted to make sure that this line that is showing outside of the graffiti area is horizontal. So once I have those lines, then I can erase those marks that are inside the graffiti. But I am just drawing my bricks until I touch my graffiti. Then I'm going to plan out the next row. So I'm going to do it up here near the last row, so I can kind of judge my offset here. So I'm going to go right at the 4, have a 1/2 inch gutter, my 7 again, sorry, 5 inches. I was wondering why that looked awfully large when I was moving over here. So 4.5, that'd be 9.5. My gutter, and my gutter. Alright, so that started off at 4, so I'm coming down here, my 4, my space there, my 9.5, my space there, my 15, and my space. Now most of this isn't going to show, it's just going to be a small little line there squeezing in right by my graffiti arrow and key line. And none of this is here, but I still wanted to plan it out so that I knew exactly what will be showing up over here. So line up these marks and get my brick and mortar lines. Then I'm going to go on to my next row. This at least gives me an idea. So I had 4 here, so I want to offset that. So for this one, I don't want it exactly to line up here. I kind of like what I did in this one. Ooh, excuse me, hit the camera there. In this one where my mortar areas did not all line up every other row. It's basically almost every 2 rows. So I kind of like that pattern of offset I had created there. So I don't want it to line up to this one, so I don't want to start the 1.5 and 2 again. So I think I'm going to go maybe at the 3. Start there, my mortar line, my 5 inches, my mortar line, my 5 inches again, and my mortar line. Alright, so down below here, Now they have those marks. Again, part of this it won't be seen because it runs into my graffiti. But I go ahead and make those marks inside the graffiti so I can make sure that I am creating these mortar lines, these vertical lines to separate my bricks so that they are vertical. And that one's not going to show at all. And that leaves this one. And that leaves me one more row to figure out. So I think I'm going to start at the 5 here. And finish getting my brick shapes here. Okay, so once I have that, then I want to erase any part of my horizontals where my mortar lines are, just to let that merge together. And then if I wanted to do anything else with my bricks, like in my acrylic version I showed you there, I wanted them to look more aged, so I rounded over corners. And then we also had the benefit of working with a texture medium, and that also helped give us a older look to our surface. So if I do want that on these bricks, that's my next step. So if I do want a crack in my brick, or to round over my corners a little bit, give them a little bit of an aged look, a worn down look, then that's my next step, is to come in and play with the edge of my background texture. So this is your next step of your graffiti. You want to plan out a background. So you may want to do some further research into graffiti. Look at some examples of where it's been placed, what those surfaces look like. And you will want to come in and draw your background surface. So it is up to you what kind of background surface you create. You don't have to create a brick wall. It can be any surface in which graffiti is found. So do a little research. Look online to see where and what kind of surfaces some graffiti has been seen on. I'm going to take a big chunk out of that corner. And once you have that, then draw lightly that background behind your graffiti. And once that is done, we will discuss how to apply paint to our graffiti design. So that will be our next video.